Oh, there was a bit of a lag there. Howdy, y'all. Happy Tuesday. Happy Semantics Day, I guess. We're back. Semantics, for those who don't know, is a weekly show about web, accessibility, and great user experiences. And today I'm joined by Salma, better known as White Panther. Salma, hello. Welcome to the stream.
Howdy, howdy everyone. Howdy stream goers. How are you doing? I hope you're all doing very well. It's Tuesday. It's the weather is good here actually. You didn't ask that, but I'm going to tell you. And life is busy.
I first. I really need to spend more time outside because I don't even really know. Like, I think the weather's good. Actually, Texas weather has been blazing hot as of late. I went to Renaissance Fair this weekend
Oh,
and tons of fun. Blazing hot though. I a few of my fellow party goers had to leave early because Texas heat, being outside too long, no good. Uh, don't recommend. Ren Fair, recommend. Texas heat, don't recommend.
my colleague Brittany at Netlify actually went to a similar kind of thing in Michigan, Holland, Michigan. They have this like Dutch fair with tulips and clogs and Dutch clothes, but also blazing hot. Could not recommend the weather, but could recommend the event. Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, so I'm super thrilled to have you on. For those who haven't had the chance to meet you, would you like to give yourself an introduction?
Yes, my name's Salma. You may know me as White Panther. Here's me in the chat right there. I also stream on Twitch. I've been streaming on Twitch for almost 2 years now. But in my day job, I'm a staff developer experience engineer at Netlify. And if you don't know what that means, and developer relations and developer advocacy, basically my job is to be in between the middle point between the people who make the product and the people who use the product, and to advocate for developers being able to use the platform as easily and as seamlessly and as enjoyably as possible. And I get to make cool stuff, get to make cool demos, get to do conferences, get to do all sorts of things like this. And in the past, I was a teacher. I was a music teacher. And what I like about this job is that I get to combine my experience of teaching with my experience of tech and put them together and have a good time, basically. That's me.
Sounds good. Yeah, and we're here to talk about the Jamstack. And so maybe the best place to start is kind of the big question to set the stage. What is the Jamstack?
Okay, this could go on a long tangent, could go on a long road, but the Jamstack has been around as a concept for 7 years now. It kind of started emerging with Netlify in 2015. And here's the TLDR. I'm going to read out my blog post, right? Because so I can avoid saying anything nonsensical. Jamstack is an architectural model centered on serving pre-generated, highly portable static assets, and we'll get to what that means in a minute, from web development platforms, usually via a content delivery network, which is also shortened to CDN. And we can talk about what a CDN is later if you want. And so that's it. It's about serving static stuff from a content delivery network, cached, and that static stuff is cached in the content delivery network. Around that Jamstack concept, it can be elevated and enhanced by a wide variety of modern adjacent development tooling, which I call Jamstack adjacent technology. And these are things like serverless functions, edge functions, content management systems, version control integration, API services, software as a services, all the other good fun stuff that can help you like bring together different services to make your website or products. So at the core of Jamstack is that Jamstack isn't about tools or frameworks or services or anything. It's a way of working. And it's defined by how you build websites rather than the tools with which you choose to build them. And the reason why it came about, which I think we'll get to this later, is to solve a few of the problems that existed in the web space in the 2010s and early 2000s.
And by problems with web development, like what do you mean? Like what is Jamstack trying to address there?
Okay, so traditionally, in a traditional kind of web development model, requests for web pages are processed by a managed server. And what that does is, so a managed server receives a request for a web page from a user, from a browser, and then in real time, the HTML document is built and bundled up and then sent back to the user's browser. So there's that whole kind of journey of request, build, serve, I call it. And then if your web page is big and complex, if there's a lot of logic in the back end, if there's lots of different jobs that your server needs to do in order to build that HTML, and if the page request was far away from the origin server, this meant the websites could be really slow, and resulting in a bad experience for the end user, because we know as more and more people use the web for everything, a fast experience is key to making sure your websites are usable, people return to them, you make sales, you grow your business, and people can get your information. So there's the problem of requests being far away and requests taking too long because everything has to be built and bundled up in real time on the server. So Jamstack solved that problem in two ways. Firstly, because Jamstack centers on serving static assets, it means that in order for your static asset to be cached and served from the CDN, it needs to be pre-generated and bundled up at build time, not request time. So this means with Jamstack, a server doesn't need to build anything when there's a request sent to the browser. It's just served when you get a request, it's served from the CDN. And so already it's a bit faster because you're serving a static asset that's ready to serve. But secondly, this whole concept of a CDN is a network of distributed servers around the world in what we call like an edge network. And those network nodes work together to serve the cached content to the user from the closest server location possible. So it's a lot faster. Cached content that's pre-generated is being served closer to the user. So that's the first thing. That the problem of slow websites that were generated in real time are now faster because they're served from an edge network and they're pre-generated. No extra work needs to be done. Another problem that Jamstack was solving is the pain of developing on a huge monolithic full stack tech stack. So before Jamstack, most websites were built using that, like an entire full stack framework. It comprises backend server code, front end templates, databases, everything all in one. And I'm sure some of you out in the audience have worked like this before. I definitely have. And new product features can take weeks to build, test, and release to production. Software upgrades can be risky and difficult to roll back. And also your development environments are really, really difficult to provision. You need to make sure you've got a database, a mock database from kind of obfuscated data. You need to make sure that you probably got a number of virtual machines running the whole thing because your computer can't handle it or things like that. I've been there, I've done it. Vagrant and VirtualBox, etc. And so the way Jamstack solved this problem was that it shifted to a decoupled architecture, which meant that the backend API services, front-end templates, database, and all the other little bits and pieces that you use to make a fully functioning website are separated and streamlined, which meant that developers of different disciplines can develop in parallel, release their own code and go faster. I remember back in the day when I was working at a place that had one of these big monolithic tech stacks, it took 6 hours once to release 2 lines of CSS that fixed a bug. And no one wants that anymore. So this whole decoupled thing, Jamstack really, really mainly focuses on the front end, all of your pre-generated HTML documents and static assets. Jamstack is kind of centered on that front end server website, serve HTML documents to the browser. So the thing with Jamstack is that your site may or may not speak to any number of API services at build time or on the client. Um, but during that build process, Jamstack sites can call out to those APIs to fetch that data to your CMSs or to wherever, to fetch that data and already and build your pages based on that data, cache it, store it, and send it out via a CDN. And once a Jamstack site is built, it's cached as an immutable deploy. And what that means is that it's saved in that state. So every time you deploy, a whole new bundle of your whole website is created, not separate different pages that you might change, but your whole website, which means the Jamstack, you can roll back and forward really quickly with no hassle compared to if you wanted to roll back a big monolithic server, big monolithic application. I remember I had to, when I was releasing this big monolithic application, I had to canary to different servers manually. I had to say, right, let's release to that server, let's release to that server. And it took hours and it was scary and painful as a front-end developer. So Jamstack just takes care of all of that for you with immutable deploys. And what's more, a breaking backend change will not affect your Jamstack site until the next time it's rebuilt. So Jamstack sites are less buggy, more stable, easier to release and roll back and deploy, and you have full ownership of the code. I have gone on a huge tangent.
No, you're great. That point about like the API and the server, the fact that rolling back is hard. Like I've definitely, like, that resonates. At my previous role, I was on the front end team, and then we had like a sister team that was doing our API stuff. And once or twice, the API contract had to change in a way that was going to be a breaking change. And that meant that both the front end team and the back end team had to just basically like hold hands and promise to jump at the right time. And God forbid there were
I've
any
been there.
bugs.
Yes, I've been there.
Yeah, such a pain point. And to have a site that's gonna stay up and be alive and be, totally operational, even as the back end that powers its builds changes, that's huge. That's
Exactly.
incredible. Um,
And there's one more thing that the Jamstack did to solve even more problems. Is I was just talking to you about how when I was releasing this huge monolithic application, I had to canary to different servers, and the servers were on premise, and there was a specific dedicated DevOps IT operations team to manage those servers, to manage things like security
mhm,
upgrades and DNS, and then scaling the availability of those servers when traffic increased.
mhm,
I remember because it was an e-commerce place. So whenever there was Black Friday or Christmas, they had to do all of these load tests to make sure that the systems and the servers were scaled correctly to accommodate the extra requests. But with Jamstack, that's all taken care of for you. Your web development platform, like Netlify, automatically scales when it needs to. Yes, you'll have to pay a little bit more for it, but you don't even need to worry about anything. Plus, you get HTTPS certificates, SSL, for free as well, automatically. And you can even get a site online without buying a domain with platforms like Netlify. So it made websites faster, developers faster and more happy, and
mhm.
scaling less complicated. And that is the absolute concept. We've got a raid. Whoa, we've got a
Yeah.
huge raid. We've got a huge raid.
Yeah, welcome,
What?
welcome, Lena Lux and friends. Sorry, both of us being streamers here. Like, I was like waiting for the moment when I could be like, yes,
Sorry.
thank you for the raid. Thank you so much for the raid, Lena. It's hugely appreciated. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome in.
Selma, do you mind if I give a quick semantics pitch before we hop back into
Go
Jamstack stuff?
ahead. You
All
you
right.
go ahead.
So Semantics is a weekly show here, twitch.tv/semanticsdev, where every week I bring on guests from around web development and web design to teach me something about building great user experiences for the web, typically in a hands-on way and typically with a focus on accessibility and or core web technologies. Today, we have the one and only White Panther here to talk about the Jamstack, and we're so glad y'all are here. Thank you all for coming through. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks for joining
so
us. Wow, didn't expect it. Let's go. Here I am talking about the Jamstack to all these people. What were we talking about?
we were, I mean, just in general, talking about the complexity of like running servers for all
Oh
this
yeah.
kind of stuff, and like having security policies and
Mm.
whatnot. And God forbid the server just go down in general, right? Because that
Mm.
happens.
Oh,
Servers go
yes.
down, and now your front end is broken because it's actively like calling out to an API that is down,
Yeah.
and so now maybe your front end was expecting to get a request back, it didn't get it back, and maybe if you haven't done your proper error handling, the whole page falls apart, right? Like
Whole page falls apart.
every domino in the chain just falls over if if you haven't properly handled the API foot guns.
Exactly. And so a lot of people think that Jamstack is a set of tools, a set of front end frameworks, or a set of APIs and serverless functions. But I wanted to kind of baseline reiterate that Jamstack is the way you work. Jamstack can use any
Mhm.
tools or any services as long as the core part of what you're building centers on RIP servers, you will be missed. As long as the core part of what you're building centers on serving pre-generated static stuff from a CDN, then you're good to go. And you can do things on the client if you want afterwards with JavaScript, great. But if your site is mostly static, pre-rendered, then it's
Mhm.
Jamstack. One note to come back to actually about the name Jamstack. Now, initially, I'll write it in the chat. Initially, Jamstack was written as capital Jamstack, which was reflecting the fact that back in 2015, when this concept first came out, is that you were using JavaScript for J for JavaScript, APIs and external services and markup together to build these sites on the Jamstack. But it's since been now kind of rebranded to just Jamstack to actually show that it's not about the technologies you use.
Mhm.
Jamstack sites don't necessarily need to use Jamstack, don't necessarily need to use JavaScript or APIs. And it's just, it can just be a static HTML page served and cached from a CDN. And so that's kind of why the shift happened, because Jamstack does not dictate your tooling. There are a number of static site generators as well, which are kind of very Jamstack adjacent. They are kind of, if you're using a tool or a framework to build static files, then it's very, very Jamstack. But there are a number of static site generators that use zero JavaScript, like Jekyll, for example. I mean, you can write JavaScript on the client, but Jekyll's built in Ruby. So it's not a prerequisite.
Mhm.
MStack, markup stack. As long as it's no managed server stack, then we're fine.
But it does seem like in at least the past year or so, there have been some aspects of kind of the Jamstack ecosystem that have moved back towards doing some things on a server or specifically in a serverless way, right?
This is what I refer to as Jamstack adjacent
Okay.
technologies, because I think serverless functions and things like that get bundled in with Jamstack because they are services provided by web development platforms, right? So,
Mhm.
Netlify gives you serverless functions, you've got Cloudflare, you've got Vercel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because those platforms are so closely related and fall in the same kind of web development category as static site generators and serving static files, I think erroneously serverless functions have been called Jamstack because they kind of come along with a lot of Jamstack sites. But the core of that is that it's an architectural way of working, and so using serverless functions is just a way to call a server when you need to. It's not part of that static site build, is it? So yes,
Mhm.
your serverless functions might live in the same code repository, but when they are bundled up at build time, they are not stored in the same way as static HTML sites. They are not sent to the browser as cached assets, etc. So it's an adjacent technology, these kind of things. And now we've got a lot of things like edge functions being released as well, which are serverless functions at the edge. So again, serverless functions, but operating at the closest point to the user, which is kind of like the CDN concept crossed with the serverless functions. So there's a question from Wingmap.
Yes.
Would 11t be a good example of a JS-less, API-less Jamstack situation? Absolutely. Now, but the reason why 11t embodies Jamstack so heavily is because it ships no JavaScript by default to the browser and just ships a folder of pre-generated built static HTML files. And that is why it's a perfect example, as Brittany says. Hi, Brittany. Because it's not about JavaScript at all, right? It's about a tool to look at your templates, to parse a bit of code, which you can write however you want in 11t using a variety of different templating languages. What 11t does is it builds it all and turns it into HTML files in a really intuitive kind of just basic folder structure way. And it's static files. Default 11t projects just ship HTML files. And that's what's so Jamstacky about it.
So, and you've recently been building and rebuilding some projects in 11t as of late, right?
Yes. So the biggest project I undertook, because of all this work I was doing around the Jamstack, and because of the kind of the investigations I was doing into it and trying to formulate actually what it was in my brain, I recently migrated my own blog site, whitepanther.com, from Next.js to 11t for this reason, in that Next.js, no hate on Next.js. It's a great tool, right? But Next.js can produce Jamstack sites, but it also gives you so much more of the adjacent stuff. And if you've ever inspected the source of a Jamstack, of a Next.js site, you'll notice how much JavaScript gets shipped to the browser. So this is the 11t site now, right? Yeah. But if I can actually send you a link to my Next.js site, 1 second.
Yeah,
because I've still got my own pantherblog.netlify.app. I've still got my old site on. And you'll notice that if you look at the network tab, you need a 3. You need a 3. Yeah. 3, not an E. There you go.
That leet speak though.
Netlify.app. Leet speak, right? So if you look at the network tab on the homepage, you'll see over 30 JavaScript files delivered to the browser by Next.js. And as a developer, my aim with my refactor was to ship as little JavaScript to the browser as possible to kind of really support that philosophy of the Jamstack of shipping basically just HTML. And let's see, you try to get to the network tab. There you go. If you do another refresh now, you'll see them.
Yeah.
There you go. Right.
Lots of stuff.
So all of that stuff. And also because Next.js is a very clever framework, there's a lot of prefetching being done of other routes because of the whole single page application thing and using Next link. And also it chunks up the pages and chunks up the JavaScript. And so you're just hit with a load of JavaScript.
Yeah, I'm noticing here that like we've got like your projects page, your talks page, your FAQs. Yes. Like these are pages we are not currently on, and it's already fetched those.
Exactly, which is great for performance. But if your core philosophy is wanting to just ship plain HTML documents as quickly as possible without the overheads of all this JavaScript, then let's see how we can get back to basics with just HTML. If you now look at the network tab of my homepage of my current site, you'll see one JavaScript file and one HTML file. And the JavaScript file, the only job the JavaScript file does on that page is to localize the time on the next Twitch stream. Yes. Yeah, it's all the JS Ben is downloaded.
Yeah, my computer is my computer's on a bit of a struggle bus right now, as it turns out. But
too many panthers on it.
That's gotta be it. Too many panthers. We gotta stop with the panthers, Salma. Just too many of them. Okay, this is not actually this is my extension that I've got.
Yeah, I got the same thing. Yeah. So there's just timeelements.js, my CSS file, an SVG, and whitepanther.com with the HTML document and a favicon, and that's it, right? And so I set about in this refactor from Next.js to 11t to ship as little JavaScript to the browser as possible. And the benefits that came out of this for me, switching to me relying on a framework like Next.js that I'd become so accustomed to, the benefits in my brain and the implications that having control of what I shipped to the browser again were manyfold, right? When I first embarked upon this project, I wanted to find the 11t way of doing things because I was so used to the Next.js way of doing things. And actually, there isn't an 11t way of doing things. You can do whatever you want with 11t as long as it builds, which results in that collection of HTML files in the output folder. And so what I found when I pivoted to 11t was that, yes, I massively improved the website performance by some ridiculous data points, but I also got back control of what I was shipping to the user and to the browser, which meant that I had more trust in what I was shipping, which meant things were debugged easier, which meant the page weight was so much lighter. Like, for example, here's a bit of a data point for you. The network requests were reduced from 75 network requests totaling 4 megabytes on the Next.js site on the homepage. And then the 11t site just makes 9 network requests totaling just 325 kilobytes. And those are purposeful kilobytes that I chose to send to the user. It also greatly improved my Lighthouse performance scores. No matter what I did with my Next.js site, I couldn't get the performance up on some of the blog posts, mainly because one of the issues that Google Lighthouse was highlighting to me was deep within the Next.js code. And I'm not expecting every single framework to be like at the cutting edge of all of what Google Lighthouse recommends, but also, unless I went and did a PR to Next.js and went deep into like the JavaScript closer to the metal, I couldn't fix that for myself because I was using such a big framework. And yes, Next.js is a wonderful tool for big team projects, for big products, right? But this, whitepanther.com is just a blog site. It's just getting a bit of data from my CMS, just displaying a bit of stuff about me. I didn't need it to be this like enterprise grade framework that gave me so many different options that Next.js gives you for incremental static regeneration, which kind of breaks the whole Jamstack static model, even though it's really brilliant and powerful. I didn't need server-side props with Next. I didn't need to server-side render anything. I just needed to throw out some HTML files on a server, on a CDN, and be done with it, right? And so this is the whole point of this stream, is about picking the right tool for the job. I think some of us, it's great to experiment, right? And as anyone who knows me, I will always encourage you to build stuff, to learn things. But so I built loads of stuff with Next.js, and I learned that actually it's not always good to reach for straight away because you don't necessarily need it. And so now also I've always tried to install as few dependencies as possible to, when I'm building something on stream and someone says, oh, you get a package off NPM for that. I prefer not to, because I don't want the burden of that package that needs to be maintained and updated and upgraded. And so the less you use, the more power you have to be in total control of what you're choosing to ship to the browser. And I think we'll get onto this later, but it makes it absolutely imperative to performance and accessibility as well. Not just end user accessibility, but developer accessibility as well. And I'm really grateful. This sounds really weird and maybe a little bit too cheesy, but I'm really grateful for finding 11t, getting me closer to web standards, just going back to basics, being really humble and honest about all we really need to ship is HTML with a bit of CSS and then maybe some JavaScript if necessary. Prince in the house and learning all about platform.
Prince
Yes.
is in the house. Good to see you, Prince. Always love having you here. Um, yeah, and like,
And sorry, I just
let's
want
go.
to I just want to comment on what Wingmat said. The freedom
Yes.
Eleventy provides made it super confusing for me at first. Me too. I was like, what's the Eleventy way of doing it? How do I do this in Eleventy? And it's just like, Salma, do whatever you want. And the freedom and the control
Mhm.
is actually really, it helps you. People say this about Eleventy, but it's true. It helps you become a better developer, but not because it's a framework. That's the next big thing. It's because at the core of Eleventy is just web
Mhm.
standards, shipping HTML, staying honest, staying humble, and staying cool.
So I'm big fan of 11D over here. But you know, 11D isn't, you know, the entirety of what the Jamstack is. Like when you're
Exactly.
building a site, how do you know kind of what tools are going to fit for that site? You know, 11D is not a fit for every site out there. So how do you handle that evaluation?
Great question. Now, the thing with the Jamstack is that you don't have to make all of your decisions straight away. And I know Stephanie Eccles says this all the time. And so I'm kind of paraphrasing Steph. You can start as small as you need to on the Jamstack. If you want to just start your proof of concept or your new blog site with a single HTML page on the Jamstack, you can push it up to Netlify or wherever, and it will be there. If you then want to add something around that, if you want to add 11T or you want to add another framework, you can just run npm install and then it's all good, right? If you want to add some serverless functions to call out to some APIs, or you want to add some stuff, some JavaScript on the client, you can do that. If you want to host a database somewhere, you can do that and hook it all in. You can start at the smallest point possible and expand as you go. So, for example, with a monolithic tech stack of yesteryear, you couldn't start all over again if you'd made the wrong framework choice. It would be a huge undertaking to rewrite everything from scratch. But because Jamstack is decoupled, you could start with maybe a selection of 3 tools, this CMS or that database or that authentication service. And if one of those isn't working for you, just switch one out for the other. You don't have to switch out everything. And so again, the answer is always it depends. How do you know which tools to use? You try, and if it doesn't work, you try another one. And the good thing is that it's easy to switch it out and try another one over and over again because of the
Mhm.
decoupled architecture.
And I think that really ties to what you were talking about with like the developer ergonomics and developer accessibility. Like we've all been in like the situations where like you have to use a very specific conglomeration of tooling because for whatever reason that's just a stack, and if those
That you
tools don't play
inherit.
nice to each
Yeah.
other, you know, like
Yeah.
yeah, it's a painful experience. It's miserable, right?
Yeah.
And so to be able to just like kind of swap things out and mix and match is hugely enabling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, you've probably, all of you in this chat have been there where you have gone to a new job or you have inherited something where the tech stack was so intertwined with each other. And even if, as a good developer, you want to make progress, you want to push forward, you want to pitch something new that's a bit more modern and innovative, there's just no time or budget to switch. So you have to live with these old rickety things that you can't
Mhm.
move from. And developers don't like that. The developers I've worked with, they want to try new things. They want to move forward. They want to break free. And especially like you said before, back end and front end developers don't necessarily want to hold hands with each other all the time because they want to be able to move faster and move independently without breaking things so much. So that this kind of is a decoupled, the way of working the decoupled architecture I have had such better times with than the older way of working.
Mhm. You touched on briefly, and I'd love to just like kind of revisit. You touched on briefly the intersection between performance and accessibility. And a lot, like oftentimes on your streams and in podcast appearances you've been on, you've mentioned that in your mind, performance is accessibility. Would you talk about what that means for you?
So performance is accessibility because if think about this, if you've got an old phone or an old device that has a slow internet connection, you have a slow internet connection, you've got an old phone, and your JavaScript bloated or server-side rendered or slow website needs to be served to that small old device on a slow internet connection. Chances are that that content's not going to get to that device in any kind of timely manner. Therefore, that person will not be able to access that content. And I talk about this in a talk that I wrote last year and did a couple of times, which was called How to Prevent the Collapse of Society by Building an Accessible Web. And the premise around this is that we are living in a zombie apocalypse. All monitors and screens are broken and the internet is slow 3G, but everyone needs to be able to get content to their ears or wherever in order to learn how to fight the zombies and save their lives. They need to get life-saving information over a slow internet on a screen that you can't really see. And so, yes, there's the whole kind of assistive technology undertones to that, but also I've tried to put people in the shoes of everyone needs accessibility. Everyone needs to get that content in order to save each other's lives and survive the zombie apocalypse. So if you can't get content quickly, you are doing your users a disservice because somebody might need to get life-saving information at any one time, right? And if your website that tells you how to save someone's life when you notice someone on the street in a particular way, right? If your website takes 10 seconds to load, that's 10 seconds that you could be saving that person's life on the street. And that's accessibility. That's access to content. It's access to knowledge and access to potentially, it's a dire, dark use case, but it's access to saving lives, really, if you think about it like that. And so that's why performance is accessibility, because the faster your sites are, the more performant your sites are, the easier your sites are to use and load by your device, the more accessible your content is. And, you know, if we're talking about capitalism, the more sales you'll make, the faster you'll grow, etc.
Absolutely. So in that vein, like, what are Jamstack sites, or I guess what can Jamstack tooling and the ecosystem, like what can we do to better enable that going forward?
This is a tricky question because there are a myriad frameworks out there, and we've already
Mhm.
touched on Next.js, which is a great framework that gives you a lot, right? A lot for free
Mhm.
and open source. But because frameworks are often so intertwined with the services that come along with them, sometimes it's not really in, I haven't seen, I don't want to sound political in this, but it looks like, and a lot of the time, these frameworks, in the framework's remit, is not accessibility first and performance first. I mean, there's a lot that say they're performance first, right? I
Mhm.
haven't made enough investigations to kind of rank them or anything. But we know, as like, I don't want to call out Next.js here, but, and I know there's a reason for this, but for example, when you do create Next app, there is no HTML lang attribute on the HTML tag. Which you need for accessibility, right? So it's within the developer's own space to create that custom document JS file that goes in the
Mhm.
repo, in the pages folder, to bootstrap that HTML tag with the lang attribute on. So the bottom line that I want to get across here is that I don't think frameworks can solve that problem of performance, accessibility performance. And it's a big shame, because if they could, then wouldn't that make the web a better place for everybody else? Unfortunately, during my web travels and everything that I've done, I think it falls on developers to really evangelize for that, if for want of a better word, and advocate for that and educate themselves on how best that fits in their context. And it's a shame, but it's a bit like how I'm sure developers out there, right? You've been in development teams and you're building a website for a client and you say, oh, but we need to do X, Y, Z in order to make this accessible for ABC. And then a product manager or leadership says, sorry, not in budget. We can't do that. We just need to ship. And so you see, like, developers feel like the underdogs in that situation, because I know so many developers, I've worked with them, who are committed to creating these 100% accessible experiences as far as they can, but there's no budget, there's no time. And I feel like that's kind of mirrored in the front end framework space as well. I wonder if there could one day be an accessibility first framework. However, if we're talking about performance as accessibility, then frameworks that aim to ship no JavaScript by default, which is going to make your site better, and just HTML, then that is immediately prioritizing performance and accessibility. So I think that's how you can best select the right tool for the job and for the most accessible experience you want to create, you can create. It's about just thinking about the Jamstack core philosophy at the bottom line. Static stuff, not necessarily JavaScript, not necessarily any APIs, static stuff, CDN, and automatically you're leveling up your performance, which could be accessibility at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think as you were describing, even things like Next.js not by default including the lang attribute, it seems to me like, at least what I'm hearing is that it would be nice if these frameworks could provide more sensible defaults. Like one of my
Yes.
favorite metaphors is the one of the pit of success. Um and just like make it really easy to do the right thing even by accident. Um
Yes.
but it also doesn't seem like you're necessarily bought into the notion that a framework can always guarantee the pit of success, and
No,
that
and it's, a framework is, it's not a human being, right? This is another thing. A framework is not a human being. JavaScript is not a human being. HTML is not a human being. And as human beings, as developers, human beings, we are building for human beings and not machines. And that, therefore, we need empathy and we need reason and we need to make decisions and think critically. Frameworks and automated tools cannot do that. Not even AI can really do that, right? And I think so that's probably like by design. If JavaScript has feelings too, if I mean, I don't want to get political again, but there are companies who have tried to solve the accessibility problem by providing overlays as a service, accessibility overlays as a service. Absolute nightmare. Extra JavaScript, probable nonsense. Again, you are shifting that problem to another dependency. Absolutely mind-blowing. And so accessibility is a human issue, and I don't think you can solve it with machines. Yes, you can write code to be parsed by other machines for humans to understand more. But at the end of the day, accessibility is more than just screen readers, isn't it? It's absolutely more than screen readers. It's more than color contrast. It's more than performance. It's a combination of everything that I think only humans can solve. And if frameworks did claim to solve all of those accessibility problems, people would get lazy. Developers would get lazy. And there are a variety of different conditions and disabilities and stuff that are changing all the time. and your customer base is changing all the time. And so to automate that and be lazy and think, yes, taken care of, I've done it, it's accessible, boss, done it. It takes the human element away, and we have to stay human with accessibility because we are making things accessible for humans.
I love that
That's
so much.
quite
That
profound,
I
wasn't it?
was enraptured the whole time. That was incredible. Um, yeah. So we're getting close-ish to the end. We've got amazing how time flies by, really,
I
honestly.
know.
But one of the things I wanted to ask too is, what is something that you're really excited about over the next year or so in the Jamstack? Like, what's got you fired up and excited?
It really is just seeing what people can create with as little as possible. Because I think we went through a bit of a honeymoon period with frameworks like I mean, frameworks like Next.js, I was going to say, but like sometimes you forget in this little industry sphere that we've got that Next.js is still like relatively new. Some of these frameworks are still very, Remix is very new. Solid.js is very new. All of these things, right? So we forget that not like a billion people are using it. But I think in our little Twitter industry sphere or whatever, there's a lot of people who reached for things like Next.js for everything, like I did last year. And
Mhm.
that was kind of like as a need for my job at the time, but also because I was excited just to explore it and try new things and see what else it was capable of. In a podcast that I did, the podcast that you referred to in JS Party, the analogy I came up with was with these JavaScript frameworks. It was like everyone was at this frat party and they were getting wasted on JavaScript. Let's build absolutely everything with JavaScript. Let's let's build HTML with JavaScript. Let's do CSS with JavaScript. Let's do anything we can and want with JavaScript. There we go. Look, Salma says we're junk on JavaScript, and it's time we learn how to leverage the powerful web primitive to enhance our web experiences. So what I'm really excited about is actually seeing now people sober up a little bit. Just stand back from the JavaScript a little and let's go back to web standards and as close to like native web as possible. And who was I talking about this the other day? Oh, I completely forgot what I was going to say, but it was really important. Yes, let's sober up and let's see what people can do without it, and see how powerful HTML can be, because actually HTML like is pretty flipping powerful. Like for example, like I released a blog post a few weeks ago about creating an HTML only accordion using the HTML details tag. There are so many HTML tags that I have not yet explored, and the power, the native power in them is amazing. If you might have seen on Twitter that Google are now that kind of now they're starting to talk about the page transition API, which is all these powerful things without JavaScript that you can do with CSS as well. And so I know it's not really about Jamstack, but it is about the philosophy of Jamstack that I'm excited about. Back to basics, static assets, CDN, no nonsense. That you don't, if you don't need these serverless functions, if you don't need this, that, and the other, then get rid of it. Let's go back to basics. Let's take off the makeup. Let's just see ourselves for what we are and be human about it and embrace the web. That's what I was going to talk about. I didn't want to like shout about Netlify too much in this little Jamstack stream, but this is one of the things that Netlify is focusing on with using Deno for edge functions. So rather than Node. So Deno is a runtime, web runtime built on open standards, right? It's open source,
Mhm.
and it's all about like native web APIs and stuff rather than all these proprietary extra things. And I think that the framework, the JavaScript space is so saturated, and it's great because people are jumping on the train of doing all these other things. Astro is one we haven't mentioned as well. And there's Felt, and there's Nuxt and Vue and Next and React. And there's, I mean, it's great to have so many options. But at the same time, at the end of the day, we're all just building things that are going to be displayed in a browser. And the browser can only do so much, but you can also do so much to ensure that that experience for the people who experience it are having the best possible experience possible. And you could be innovative with that.
Mhm.
You don't need to use all this fancy stuff. And so I'm looking forward to like the positioning of the Jamstack being this architectural model where it's static first, build first, make it fast, make it simple, and have fun with it at the same time.
Absolutely. Um, that really gets to the end of any of the questions I had. So I wanted to open this up for the chat. If y'all have any questions for Selma, I would love to see them. I'm sure Selma would be thrilled to
Let's
answer.
go.
Um, yeah, if you get, we got a comment in here about Astro's approach as
Well, Be Home's
yeah.
Dev is here to tell us all about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's also true of Astro as well. Node.js by default. So I think there's a lot of that's the kind of there's two levels of bandwagon, right? There's the
Mhm.
ship Node.js by default. Let's make it simple, back to the web, and also how much can we give you in one framework? But the problem is, like, if you want your framework to be adopted, then you need to provide a wide variety. That's the kind of mindset. You need to
Mhm.
provide a wide variety of functionality for more and more people to be able to use it. And so um, that's the thing. It's a hard balancing act. Do you give the people what they want, or do you stand firm and say no? Let's just prioritize the web, web standards, and helping you build
Mhm.
stuff in a better way.
Absolutely. Um, not seeing any more questions at the moment. Um, yeah.
Ben, I want
So
to ask you a question. I want to
yeah,
ask you a
yeah. Let's do
question.
that. Let's do that.
So
Yeah,
tell me about your experience on the Jamstack. You say you like the Jamstack, but like, what's
yeah.
your journey? What's your experience? How have you found it? And where do you want to go from here?
Hey, that's a fantastic question. And actually, for me, so it's interesting to me that you've kind of brought up Next.js as the thing that you were working with, almost, like that was what you needed to for your work, right? And for me, my journey actually came. It was also from the React ecosystem. My last role was a React exclusive role. But in my free time, I was building things with Gatsby. I had a little portfolio site that was, it was actually, that was, I had a portfolio and a blog site. For whatever reason, I wasn't merging the two, but I had the portfolio that was just shipping just straight up React. And then I had a blog site that was using Gatsby, and I found myself like, with especially the Gatsby site, like struggling against the tool chain. It felt like every few months when I needed to like come back to it and publish a new article, I personally was struggling a lot with all the dependencies seemed broken all of a sudden, right? My pipelines weren't passing. That was a struggle I had. And it felt like every time I was adding on to my site, I was, fighting with my my own personal hell that I had built for myself. It's like it
Yeah.
seemed like, right. And not to diss Gatsby, right? I think that it definitely has a use case. It just wasn't for me and my blog. I really struggled with it. I didn't quite agree with its opinions, but it seemed like React needed to be the system I needed to be writing in. It was about then that I discovered 11D via Andy Bell's Learn 11D from Scratch course, and I think that really set me on. It was very freeing for me because it was like a lot of the things that I had been struggling with, the opinions I had clashed with Gatsby on. It was freeing to see that there was a system I could use that didn't need those. One of those
Yes.
opinions that Gatsby has, for instance, is you will it your website needs a single page application router. Um, I know Marcy Sutton did a lot of fantastic work in making the Gatsby router as accessible as possible, but I still don't think that single page application routing is as accessible as just interpage, like downloading a new document routing. So that wasn't an opinion I really agreed with, and it was just nice to be able to get like back to those fundamentals as well. And since then, I've been kind of on the 11D journey, just trying all the new features, stuff like that, just seeing kind of what I can do. Not that it's gonna meet every use case, but
Exactly.
yeah.
And that's the thing to be mindful of as well, is that I think we can sometimes get into a bit of a pattern like I did last year. Oh, I need to start a new project, so I'll use Next.js because I know how to use it, or I use this because I know how to use it. Oh, I've
Mhm,
done this before, so I'll copy and paste my boilerplate and do it again. And while it's actually a little bit more difficult to get started with a new tool, you need to weigh up your options, because
mhm,
not one tool can be the right
yeah.
thing for everything, which is the whole point of this. It's that use the right tool for the job, do some research, ask around, ask in the community, try something, and if it's not working out for you, then change it again.
Mhm,
Whitepanther.com is actually in its third iteration. I started first with Svelte and Sapper, then I moved to Next.js and Contentful, and then I moved to 11T and Contentful. And so it might change again if I feel like it. I mean, I really don't want to do another migration again, but maybe there will be a case for it as the project and my blog develops, right? And that's the thing with the Jamstack. You can pick and choose and switch in and switch out whenever you need.
mhm. Absolutely. All right, I'm gonna move on to this one question in the chat. Um,
I'll vamp. I'll just do
and
a little dance.
yeah, absolutely. In the meantime, would you like to talk about where people can find you and what you're doing?
Okay, yeah. So if you joined in the raid before after I introduced myself, my name is Salma, and I am a staff developer experience engineer at Netlify. If you want to know what Netlify is, you can go to netlify.com. If you want to find out everything about me, you can go to whitepanther.com. And I stream on Twitch. You can find me on Twitch. If you just click on my profile, or you can, there you go, there's a little shout out. I am all over the internet. I write
Mhm,
blog posts, I stream, I do podcasts, I create videos. I've also been experimenting with creating silly TikToks. So if TikTok is your bag, go and find me on TikTok. And I am hanging out on a stream near you, building stuff, learning things, and loving what I do. And I always love getting more people in
mhm,
my Discord as well, because we've got some great like tech discord.gg. The Claude got some tech help channels. We've got a great group of people in there who are so welcoming, so warm,
mhm.
so inclusive. And if you ever want to talk about tech or come and post some memes, then welcome in. Come on in. That is me.
I'm going to heartily endorse both the streams and the Discord. I earnestly wish I could make more of your streams, but unfortunately, time zones just mean
Time
that like
zones.
you're starting at like 4 in the morning for me, and I'm waking up at like 8, and you're wrapping up. It just doesn't quite line up all the time, but
And
it's
you're
a
streaming
wonderful.
at bedtime for me, and I'm all shiny and sweaty.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, by the way, for coming on. I really do appreciate
Pleasure.
it. And y'all, please do join the Claw Discord. It is a wonderful place. I've enjoyed every conversation I've had there. And absolutely, just please go follow Salma all the places. Salma, thank you so much for joining the stream and talking
It's
about
been
Jamstack today.
wonderful.
I
Thank you
I
so much.
I hope you had a great time, chat. I hope y'all had a great time. We're actually stick around. By the way, we are gonna find someone to raid, but next week I've got Adrian Roselli coming on. Adrian, first of all, is maybe one of the people whose writings I've been most influenced by, accessibility wise. And he has a
OG.
series called Under Engineered, where he builds common interface components, like complex interface components, the simplest HTML first most approach. And so he's going to be hopping on. We're going to be doing some of that. So that's next Tuesday. So follow the channel if you want more of this kind of stuff. And yeah, it's been great having y'all.
Thank you, Ben. I've had a great time. You've all been so lovely. It's great that we got a raid, and I've loved talking about Jamstack with you. It was the time flew. So thanks so much for being such a wonderful host.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good one. Bye.